My clients ask me a lot of the time, what should I eat? What should I not eat? And although the food itself is very important and no doubt very different for every person what their needs are, but eating mindfully, we find that speaks even more loudly than what the food that we're eating is on its own. And this idea of bringing mindfulness around eating is that our emotional state affects so much our ability to make dietary and lifestyle choices. And so more than it is about giving people a list of what to eat and what not to eat or just serving them a meal plan, it's about working with the things that are keeping them from being in their own body and from understanding where their cravings are coming from and their desires. And so what we want to offer today are just 3 ways to help connect and integrate this daily intake of everything so we can better digest our experience.
That yellow cord that extends all the way from the earlobe goes all the way down into the guts. That's the vagus nerve. It goes all the way from the cerebellum and down, winds around the larynx, and basically controls the muscles around voice production. It goes past the thymus, it tangles up with the heart and the lungs. It winds all the way down across the length of our gastrointestinal tract, our gut. So when we talk about the gut, we mean all the way from our mouth basically to our anus. And along that whole path, the vagus nerve follows. So as soon as we take a belly breath, and anyone who's ever read about anger management or knows a little something about it, whenever we're feeling heated, the best way to sort of gain control of ourselves and maybe step a little bit outside that anger is deep breathing. It's also true with anxiety. It's true with any emotion that feels too strong for us. If we ground in our breath, with that breath, we can actually turn from sympathetic, which is our fight and flight mode, to parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. So we're literally letting our body know it's okay. We can rest now. We don't have to stay anxious. We don't have to stay upset. And the vagus nerve is really the pathway for relaxation. It also lets our body know what's going on inside. So this is literally kind of the subway system for the gut, the heart, and the brain. It links all of them together. So when people talk about the mind-body, this is exactly what they mean. The brain, the heart, and the stomach, not as separate, but really as different stops on the same train, on the same line. And the first stop on our subway today is the gut.
Nerve, by the way, the fibers in that nerve, 90% of those fibers. Do you think they're taking information from the brain to the body, to the gut, or do you think they're taking information from the gut into the brain? Just take a wild guess. From the gut to the brain, 90%. So that's how much the gut has to do with our mood, with how we think, because those fibers are bringing information from the gut. If you think about the gut, it's where we meet the world open wide every day. It's the most intimate we get with things that are outside of ourselves. If you think about, chewing something, right, and sending it down the gut. We are hollow from our mouth to our anus. We have this tube. And what protects this tube is really microorganisms along with our own gut. But in there is how we're sampling the world. And everything that we put in becomes our very own cells. We're building ourselves anew every day. It's our source of immunity, 70%, and also contentment. Do you know what serotonin is? It's a neurotransmitter, right? That allows us to feel good. It's a good mood neurotransmitter. It allows us to function in the world. At least 80% of our serotonin is produced in the gut with the help of our microbiome. Researcher Julia Enders, she has studied the gut pretty extensively, and she offers that in the case of depression, it's a condition where the brain is empathizing with the gut, because more often than not, Depression is preceded by gut issues and gut imbalances. So if we can't produce those feel-good neurotransmitters, you can see how that might lead to mood disorders. So the nutrient that we want to offer today as a way to really connecting and assisting your gut to be in balance is presence. And that looks in a couple of ways. Acknowledgement, which we'll talk more as we actually go into the brain. Really being aware of what it is that we need at any particular moment, so that, connecting to when we're hungry, what are we hungry for? Or when we're sad and we feel like we just want maybe a cup of hot chocolate. Just acknowledging, like, I really want a hug, but I don't have anybody to hug right now, and so maybe I'm going to the food for it. Or just being like, no, I'm really hungry, and and I'm cold, and maybe that's the perfect thing.
So one of the things that we all know, the heart is responsible for circulating blood and oxygen to our cells. It is also the seat of vulnerability. And as has been pointed out to me, courage isn't about the absence of fear. It's about the acknowledgement of and the continuation despite fear. So in that way, when we can be fully with our heart and with everything it contains, it no longer is blocking information. So it's no longer giving the brain and the vagus nerve mixed signals where we're closing off to our experience. We're closed because of anger, we're closed because of disappointment. It's much harder for us to digest. It's much harder for us to even digest our experience. As if that is actually part of the same process, which Thais and I maintain that it is. It's actually the way we're digesting our daily intake of everything. And the heart is also mediated by the vagus nerve in terms of blood pressure and in terms of heart rate. So we can't rest our heart until we're getting exactly that, the message that I can rest now. So in the heart, in my work as a therapist, very often I will have people put a hand on their heart when they speak to a feeling that's happening for them, a fear or a feeling of loneliness, to really just be there for themselves. In a way, we're waiting for another to come to us often, or we're imagining that we're completely alone. And as soon as we place that hand on our heart, we're reminded that we're not alone, that there is always a presence of self that is connected through all the experience that this brings. And our heart immediately responds, taking those precious moments to be with the emotion that's inside the heart. Because that's part of what we're digesting every day, that we don't always think about. That is part of our daily intake. It's part of how we're affected by the world and how we're processing those emotions. So along with this, what we just explored, not only love and self-love, but vulnerability. The fact is we spend so much of our day running away from what feels vulnerable instead of just being with it. And if we just touch into it, it's not like it's going to take us over, which is the feeling that many of my clients relate to me, is that they're worried that if they start crying, they'll never stop. Or they're worried that if they acknowledge what's really going on, they won't be able to put it away. It's just going to be with them all of a sudden, and they won't have any closet to put it in anymore. It won't stay put. But the fact is that when we're with this vulnerability, it will improve our sense of connection with ourselves. Literally, what we're digesting every day, what we need to process, is with us all the time. And some of it is in our gut, and some of it is in our heart, and some of it is in our mind.
So with gratitude, then we go to the brain. Because the brain is interesting. It's actually digesting experience, as we've said a few times now. And so I said, your gut is a super brain, and now I'm offering that the brain is kind of a super gut because it is helping digest everything. It is also where physiologically digestion starts. If you take 2 seconds to think about your favorite food, maybe a favorite childhood food. Does everybody have one in their mind? Favorite childhood food. If you imagine it coming close to your lips, do you notice anything happening in your body? So I think about guava paste that my grandmother used to make in Brazil. And we actually got to pick the guava, and she would make guava paste, right? And the smell of that paste, and we used to call it Romeo and Juliet, because you would eat guava paste with cheese. It's delicious. But I can feel like my saliva is releasing. I mean, my brain already said, pancreas, liver, time to get to work, food's coming in. You know, there's a lot of communication happening, right? And so the brain is helping us set up for what is coming. The only thing about the brain is that if we're always just up here and disconnected to what's happening down below, is that there's a lot of stories that the brain can create, and there's a lot that also the brain can choose to be in denial if we're disconnected to how we actually feel.
Working with clients who are either dealing with depression and or eating disorders or anxiety. There is something called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is also known as CBT, which basically takes the negative thought about the self, usually, because that's usually the root of the problem is, I'm not enough, or I can never do anything right, or et cetera, et cetera. We all have versions of this that come up as a way to control the situation. Things feel out of control. If we have the agency to let ourselves know it's all our fault, then in a way, it's a bitter pill, but it makes us feel a little better about messing up in a very strange, convoluted way. But it's a way that the brain can control. We take full responsibility by making ourselves always wrong, say. Instead, cognitive behavioral therapy says, well, here's the repeating thought that isn't helpful, that says, I'm not enough, or I don't deserve the good things. And when we can hold that at arm's length, say, well, here's the thought, we've identified it, we can just add a little bit of mindfulness to it and hold it out a little bit and say, is that true? So the mind can be our ally and help us do this, and just hold that thought at arm's length and say, wait a second, is this really true, or is this something that I'm just telling myself? And we go from a relationship that's internalizing this thought to one where the thought is held out. It's almost like, I don't really have to eat this food that I know is going to give me a stomach ache. It's going to be great for about 15 seconds, and then I'm going to feel like crap in 20 minutes. So the negative thought is sort of the same thing. It's like, I don't have to take this in. In fact, I'm going to make a new thought that says, I am enough, and I do deserve the good things, and I'm going to eat that. And at first it might feel a little bit strange, and a little like I'm telling myself a lie, but over time, we get used to eating the thing that is healthier for us, that is actually going to make us feel better. And what Thais said about the researcher who had identified this idea that the brain really follows the gut. If you have symptoms of depression, very often it's because of a gut imbalance. And if you can address it by identifying the two things at once, say, oh, I'm going to start eating things that are going to make me feel better, and I'm going to start thinking things that are going to make me feel better. The two together, knitted together, can make huge changes. This is basically the system that we're running. And human beings have thought for a long time that they were all alone in nature and had to fight to carve out their space and their life. And indeed, we are supported by this web of life that's always with us. And so a lot of what we're talking about, linking up the gut, the heart, and the brain in our daily intake of everything, is that we can actually take more of that goodness in that is all around us, the more of the idea that we can run more of a show than we think we can, but we can also allow for what's always running the show, to sort of take away some of our anxiety and some of our fear of not belonging and some of our fear of being alone, because we are more intricately joined by the rest of life.
And so those are our key nutrients: the presence, the gratitude, and the acknowledgement for really being more fully in our health and state of wellness.
And that's something we hold, and thank you so much for joining us today.